Moscow always sold the image of a capital that could not be touched. A city wrapped in layers of defenses, radars, and iron borders. A fortress that lived in the Russian imagination as something eternal. But this winter, that image shattered in a single night. Not from a missile barrage, not from a ground invasion, from a handful of drones slicing through Russian air defenses like they weren't even there, hitting the one thing the Kremlin feared most: the lights, the heat, and the lifeline of Moscow itself. It began with a glow on the horizon, a rising plume of smoke over the Chhatura thermal power plant. A place that was supposed to be untouchable, a place that powers Moscow, heats its homes, and feeds its entire regional grid. And then the second strike came before the first fire even died down. 2 waves, back to back. No pause, no mercy. Russian soldiers filmed themselves shooting desperately from hotel windows as Ukrainian drones roared in, diving toward a facility sitting only 120 kilometers from the Kremlin. For the first time since the start of the war, Muscovites woke up not to slogans of strength, but to darkness, to cold, to smoke drifting over their houses. The state had promised protection, but protection didn't come. The explosions didn't just break concrete, they broke confidence. This wasn't a symbolic target. The Chhatura plant produces 1,500 megawatts of power, but more importantly, it provides heat in the dead of winter. When the fire tore through the transformers and the power lines buckled, hospitals lost power. Metro lines shut down, thousands of factories froze mid-operation, millions of homes went cold in a matter of minutes. And the next morning, as Russian crews rushed in to repair the damage, another wave hit them again. Ukraine didn't just hit the facility. Ukraine timed the strike for maximum humiliation. It hit during repairs, it hit twice, it hit deliberately inside the heart of Russia's air defense zone, proving that Putin's most sacred promise, that Moscow is safe, was a myth. So where was Putin? Not in the Kremlin, not above ground. He was hiding beneath Moscow in a bunker, dressed in camouflage, speaking to his officials from a concrete shelter. This wasn't the image of a man in control. This was the classic moment all authoritarian regimes eventually face. The moment when the leader retreats underground while the population freezes above him. The rat in the bunker moment. And the cost of this war finally reached the capital in a way propaganda couldn't spin. Chhatura wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a wave sweeping through Russia's strategic depth. From Kursk to Oryol, from Riyazan to the outskirts of Moscow, Ukrainian long-range drones were turning Russia's energy system into a battlefield. The Riyazan oil refinery, one of the largest in the country, was hit multiple times this year. Operations were forced to halt. That refinery normally supplies nearly half of Moscow's fuel. When it went offline, airports closed. Fuel convoys were rerouted. Panic began inside logistics networks normally hidden from public view. In Kursk alone, 16,000 people were thrown into darkness overnight. And while Moscow scrambled to pretend everything was fine, the strikes reached deeper. Power plants, fuel depots, substations. The core infrastructure Russia relies on to wage this war was suddenly a map of weak spots. But the most damaging strike wasn't physical. It was psychological. Putin had told the world, and especially the Russian people, that he was in full control, that Moscow was out of reach, that the war was something happening somewhere else. But then Ukraine hit a major power plant near the capital twice in one night, while Putin hid meters underground. And suddenly, the Russian people began asking the question the Kremlin feared most. If the state can't protect Moscow, what can it protect at all? Fear in the bunker. Anger on the streets. This combination always sparks instability. And beneath all of this, another system was collapsing. Russia's most important logistical artery, the railways. 700,000 workers, the backbone of Russia's entire industrial and military supply chain, are now in silent rebellion. Unpaid wages, no spare parts, impossible working hours, and a growing sense that the regime they support is crumbling. Russia isn't a highway nation. It never was. It's a railway empire. Tanks from the Urals, coal from Siberia, ammunition heading toward the front, all of it moves on those tracks. And now those tracks are failing. When the people who run the trains stop believing in the system collapses. Inside the military, leaks have begun reaching a dangerous threshold. More than 5% of personnel are now passing information venting frustration or sabotaging orders. That number might sound small, but history shows that once an army crosses that threshold, morale collapses from inside. Soldiers begin turning their frustration on their commanders, and the Kremlin is already quietly panicking about that reality. Because while Russia expected Ukraine to run out of energy, money, and manpower, Zelensky did something Putin never expected. He shifted the war to Russia's strategic depth. The front lines are no longer the front lines. The war is everywhere at once, from refineries to railways to power plants to Moscow itself. Ukrainian long-range strike doctrine now operates on three principles: blind the radars, bleed the economy, break the myth of invulnerability, energy blindness, economic bleeding, psychological collapse. This is modern asymmetric warfare, and Ukraine is reshaping the battlefield. And Putin knows what this means, because in the Russian historical memory, hunger, cold, and humiliation overthrow governments, not tanks. Russian history is haunted by revolutions sparked by shortages, freezing apartments, and leaders hiding far from the people they claimed to protect. In 1917, it was bread. In 1991, it was empty shelves. In 2025, it is darkened apartments in Moscow and a president hiding underground. The war that was supposed to last weeks has reached the living rooms of Russia's elite. Eggs disappearing from shelves, heating systems overloading, factories freezing. These details sound small, but they are the sparks that light revolutions. That's why the Kremlin is clinging desperately to Washington's peace plan. Not because Putin feels strong, but because he feels weak. The war has spilled into Russia. The economy is bleeding out. Internal unrest is spreading. The elites are turning on each other. And Europe sees this more clearly than anyone. European intelligence agencies have mapped Russia's structural weaknesses and concluded that Moscow cannot sustain this war much longer. Inflation is spiraling, labor shortages are worsening, logistics are collapsing, the army is exhausted. And if Putin is rewarded with territory now, everyone knows what happens next, because it has happened over and over again. 2008, Georgia; 2014, Crimea; 2022, Ukraine; 2027, the Baltics and the Suwalki Corridor. That is the timeline European ministers see. Not theory, history, proof, pattern. This is why Europe refuses to accept any deal that freezes the front lines. Giving Putin breathing room simply means giving him time to rebuild for the next war. Berlin and Warsaw are preparing for conflict because they know what occupation feels like. Washington reads the situation as geopolitics. Europe reads it as survival. And in Moscow, as the darkness spreads and the heat fails, people are beginning to understand the truth. Putin cannot say out loud, "The war is coming home." The regime's expiration date is now being whispered in kitchens and apartment stairwells across the capital. The real question is the one now circulating through the streets of Moscow. Is this all worth freezing for a man sitting in a bunker? History's answer is always the same. When people lose warmth, food, and faith, the walls of power crack. Russia is entering its most dangerous phase. The economy is collapsing, the railways are revolting, the energy grid is exposed. The leader is underground, the people are fed up, and the empire is beginning to crumble. Before you go, remember, we're completely independent. No big networks, no sponsors, and no government influence. In a world full of corruption and scripted news, your support keeps real journalism alive. So please like, share, and subscribe. It truly helps.